My name's Leah, and I'm 32 years old. For most of my life, I've been invisible to my family. They never saw me as anything more than a background character in their perfect little world. My mom's favorite line was always, "You don't matter." And somehow, she made me believe it. It was the kind of thing you hear so often. It becomes truth, even though deep down, you know it isn't. My younger brother, Ryan, was the golden child. He could do no wrong in their eyes. While I struggled and worked hard to make something of myself, they showered him with attention and opportunities. When I needed help, when my world was falling apart, they couldn't have cared less. My mom would dismiss me, telling me I was too dramatic or too sensitive whenever I reached out. Ryan, of course, was allowed to fail over and over without consequences. Yet, somehow, he was always the one getting the praise. But here's the thing, they didn't know. While they were busy ignoring me, I was quietly building something for myself. I wasn't looking for their approval anymore. I wasn't trying to earn a seat at their table. I was creating my own space, away from their expectations. They never saw it coming. When they realized what I'd done, when they saw the power I'd quietly amassed, it was already too late. This wasn't revenge. Not really. This was something deeper. It was about respect. It was about boundaries. I had learned the hard way that you can't keep giving yourself to people who don't see your worth. They thought I'd always be the invisible one. But that ended the moment I decided to take control. Growing up, I was the reliable one. You know, the one who always stepped in to fix things when nobody else would. But unlike my brother Ryan, who was treated like the golden child, I was mostly invisible to my parents, unless they needed something done. I became the family problem solver. When bills piled up, I was the one who figured out how to pay them. When things fell apart, I was the one who picked up the pieces. It wasn't glamorous, but it was expected. And I did it without complaint because, well, it was my role. Ryan, on the other hand, never had to worry about any of that. The minute he needed something, he got it. I remember when he turned 18. My mom bought him a brand new car, nothing fancy. Just a simple sedan. But it was his car, fully paid for. Meanwhile, I was 20, still driving my hand-me-down hatchback that barely ran. When I pointed it out, my mom just shrugged and said, "You'll have to make do." Ryan never even had to ask. Then there was the matter of rent. When I was in my early 20s, struggling to make ends meet after losing my job, I moved back in with my parents. They told me I could stay, but there were conditions. I had to pay rent, help around the house, and take care of chores. It was hard, but I agreed. Ryan, he lived there too, but he didn't have to do any of that. No, that I wouldn't pay a dime. And the only responsibility he had was to sit on the couch, playing video games or scrolling through his phone. It wasn't just the rent either, it was everything. The expectation that I would always be the one to take the burden on my shoulders while Ryan coasted along with minimal effort. Then came the financial hit, when my dad passed away. It was rough on everyone, but my mom made it clear that she was the one in charge. Instead of letting us grieve as a family, she treated it like a business transaction. She immediately started talking about how she was going to handle the finances, what we'd keep, and what we'd sell. When I tried to offer my opinion or ask about how things were going, she would dismiss me with a comment like, "Don't worry about it. You don't understand these things." Every time I tried to voice my concerns, it was like I wasn't even there. I could literally be in the room and still not exist to her. I wasn't her priority, and it hurt. It wasn't just the big things. It was the little things too, like when Ryan got a new smartwatch for Christmas. A gift that probably cost more than what I had saved in the past year. My mom handed it to him with a smile. asking if he liked it.
I got a mug that said,
Somebody's favorite daughter. It was a joke. A cruel one. But no matter how invisible they made me feel, I kept my head down and kept working. I did what I had to do to survive in their world. Even though I knew, deep down, I was never going to be treated like an equal. It wasn't just my mom and Ryan. Either. My stepdad, Mark, played his part in keeping me down too. From the moment he came into our lives, things shifted. My mom's priorities changed. And not in a way that benefited me. Mark wasn't a bad guy. But he always sided with my mom when it came to family decisions. He never questioned her, never challenged her. I could see that he just didn't want any conflict. And in doing so, he enabled her behavior. The dynamic became clear. Ryan was the favored one. I was the one who took care of everything. And Mark just wanted peace. I had to work harder and harder to get noticed. To prove that I was just as capable, just as worthy. But all my efforts went unnoticed, drowned out by Ryan's charm and my mom's consistent favoritism toward him. Looking back, I realized how much I'd been taken for granted. The signs were always there, but I didn't know how to change things, how to make them see me. I was too busy being the reliable one to even think about what I needed for myself. Instead of pushing for respect, I kept waiting for it to come to me. I thought if I just kept being dependable enough, they'd eventually recognize what I was doing. I was wrong. But the thing about waiting for other people to change is that it never happens on your timeline. And the moment I realized that, everything shifted for me. I'd been giving, but I wasn't getting anything in return.
it was time to change the game.
What happened next shocked everyone, including me. It wasn't until everything fell apart that I realized the truth. I had spent years trying to keep the family together, trying to hold things up, and all I got in return was more responsibility and less recognition. But then came the breaking point. It started with a financial mess. I was deep in debt from covering bills and trying to pay for my education while taking care of family expenses. I had asked for help from my mom, just something small. Really. I told her I needed a bit of support while I got back on my feet. Her response was what I should have expected. She dismissed me, as usual, telling me, "That's your responsibility." Leah, my brother, who was living at home rent-free, was nowhere to be found when I needed someone to talk to. His only concern was his latest social media post. I can't even describe the level of frustration I felt in that moment. I was barely keeping my head above water. And they didn't care. I was just another problem for them to ignore. They were content living in their comfortable, self-centered bubble while I was struggling to stay afloat. I realized, right then, that I wasn't going to get the help I needed from them, not now, not ever. But what really stung was the fact that, in that instant, they didn't even care enough to notice. They didn't see how much I was sacrificing, how much I was suffering just to keep everything running. It was always me stepping in, always me making the difficult choices. When things were good, they never remembered my sacrifices. And when things were bad, they still didn't care. So, I did what I had to do. I made the decision right there and then to stop relying on them. I wasn't going to wait around for them to finally see me.
I wasn't going to ask for their approval anymore.
I needed to take control of my own life. And if that meant doing it alone, then so be it. I stopped going to family events. I stopped reaching out for help. The withdrawal wasn't dramatic. I didn't make a big announcement. I just stopped. I started working longer hours, taking up side gigs, and eventually, I enrolled in online courses.
I didn't let them know what I was doing.
I didn't want their judgment or their pity. I was building my own future, quietly, step by step. What I didn't expect was how little they would notice. In fact, they barely reacted at all. My mom barely called. Ryan didn't even ask why I wasn't coming around. It was as if I had disappeared from their lives. But this time, I wasn't upset by it. I had been living for their approval for so long that I never realized how much of myself I had lost. Now that I was out of their reach, I felt free. Over the next few months, I began to build a career for myself. But I did it in secret. I wasn't sure how it would go. But every small success felt like a giant leap forward.
I started with freelance work, small jobs.
Really? I taught myself skills that I had never thought I would have time for, like financial planning and digital marketing. Slowly, I gained enough confidence to take on bigger projects.
My finances started to grow.
And for the first time in my life, I was doing something just for me. I had always been so focused on survival, on making sure my family was taken care of, that I never really stopped to think about what I needed or wanted.
Now,
for the first time, I could focus on myself without feeling guilty about it. The progress was slow, but it was steady. And with each passing month, I felt more empowered. What I didn't expect was the moment I would reach out to my dad.
my parents had been divorced for years.
But I hadn't spoken to him in ages.
The last time I saw him,
Things were awkward. He'd tried to reach out.
but my mom had made it clear that he wasn't welcome in our lives anymore.
I'd grown up believing the worst about him. I thought he was dangerous and unreliable. That was the story my mom had told me. But after everything that happened with my mom and the way I'd been treated, I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something wasn't right, and I needed answers. So, I took a leap. I sent a message to my dad's old number, not sure if it would even work.
I wrote,
Hi,
I don't know if this is still your number, but I wanted to say hello.
Within 15 minutes, he responded, Leah, I've been waiting 10 years for this. That simple message started everything. We agreed to meet at a park a few days later. My heart was racing when I saw him. He looked older, but still the same in so many ways. He didn't look angry or sad. He just looked relieved. We spent the next couple of hours talking.
And that's when everything changed.
I learned the truth. My dad wasn't the villain I had been led to believe. He never sent that message to my mom, the one that was supposed to make him look like the dangerous, unstable father. He was manipulated just as much as I was. And the more he told me, the more I realized just how deep the lies had gone. I couldn't ignore it anymore. The things I had been told, the way I had been kept in the dark, it all started to make sense. But that was the first step. I needed more than just his word. I needed proof. That's when I started making plans. I couldn't just sit back anymore. I wasn't going to let my family get away with this. I needed to take control, not just of my life, but of everything that had been taken from me. What happened next? It was just the beginning. Once I realized the truth about my father, everything started to fall into place. The pieces of my life that had never made sense, the things I had been told to believe, started to unravel. But it wasn't just about him. It was about me. I had spent so much time focusing on what my family thought of me, how they treated me, how they didn't see me. Now, I had a new mission: to take back control of my life, to reclaim everything I had given away. I dove into my new path head first. There was no looking back. I had learned how to survive on my own. But now it was time to truly thrive. I started making bigger strides in my career. It wasn't easy at first. There were moments when I felt overwhelmed, when the weight of everything was too much. But each small victory gave me the strength to keep going. I picked up new skills that would allow me to create my own future, independent of my family. I signed up for online courses in digital forensics, a field I had always found fascinating but never thought I could pursue. I also started learning about finance investing, budgeting, and building wealth. Slowly, I began to build the life I had dreamed of for years, but never thought was possible. While I worked on my skills,
My financial situation steadily improved. I took on more freelance work.
at first, it was just small projects, things I could manage around my full-time job. But then the projects grew bigger.
I began working with clients in industries that would have never given me a second glance before.
The best part, I didn't need anyone's permission. I didn't need my family's approval. I was carving my own path. And the more I did it, the more empowered I felt. It wasn't just about money.
It was about proving to myself that I could do it on my own.
I didn't need my mom's validation,
Or Ryan's support.
or anyone else's. I had spent so long chasing after their approval, trying to be the person they wanted me to be, that I had forgotten how to just be me. Now, I was finally discovering who that was, and it felt incredible. By the time I turned 32, my financial situation had changed completely. I had saved up enough money to start my own small consultancy business. It wasn't huge, but it was mine.
I had clients who were willing to pay for my expertise.
And I had a reputation that was growing with every project I completed. I had worked hard for this, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me. It was around that time that my family started noticing. My mom called me one day, asking how my little business was going. I could hear the forced cheerfulness in her voice, the way she was pretending to care. But I didn't let her guilt trip me into doing what she wanted. I didn't offer her any information. I simply said, "It's going well. I'm happy with it." Ryan texted me a few weeks later, asking if I could help him out with his finances. He was living at home, freeloading off my mom, and had no clue what it meant to manage money. He'd bought a brand new car that he couldn't afford and was spending way beyond his means. I didn't answer his message. I didn't want to be involved in his chaos anymore. But that wasn't the only change. I realized that my dad, after years of silence, was now back in my life. We began talking more often, and slowly, I began to understand him better. The pieces of my childhood that had never made sense, the strange, conflicting stories about him. The way my mom had painted him as a monster started to make sense. The truth was far from what I had been told. My dad wasn't the villain I had been led to believe. I knew then that if I could survive growing up in a household of lies and manipulation,
I could face anything.
Still, the changes in my life weren't just internal. They were also external.
I started to set boundaries with my family.
Something I had never been able to do before. At first, it felt like I was fighting an uphill battle. I had spent so many years trying to please them that it was hard to break away from the old patterns. But every time I said no, I felt more powerful. One thing was clear. I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't the girl who had always sought validation. I wasn't the person who had stood by, watching her family make decisions for her. I was a woman who had taken control of her life, and I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me. But just when I thought I could finally breathe, my family showed up again. And this time, they weren't going to be satisfied with just a phone call. They had no idea what I had been building, or what I had become. The moment they realized, everything changed. But it wasn't going to be on my terms anymore. I was done playing by their rules. They had no idea what I had been doing, how much I had changed, or how much power I had quietly amassed. They had continued their lives, expecting me to always be the reliable one, the one who picked up the pieces, the one who remained in the background. But that person was gone. The woman who would bend over backward for them, who would endure their mistreatment in silence, was no longer there. And I was ready to show them what that meant. It all started with a family dinner, one of those rare, awkward gatherings where everyone was forced to sit together.
My mom called it family time.
But it was always more like a performance. My stepdad, Mark, would make his usual attempts at humor, while Ryan stayed glued to his phone, only half listening. I had been invited. Of course, because it was expected of me. They didn't care whether I wanted to go. They just assumed I would. I decided it was time. No more pretending. No more hiding. I was done letting them see me as invisible. I showed up that night. The same as always, polite. Quiet. Doing what I was supposed to do. The meal was the usual awkward affair, full of forced smiles and stale conversation. My mom commented on how good I looked, the way she always did when she was trying to feign interest, when she wanted to make sure I knew I wasn't completely ignored. But her words felt hollow to me now. It was too late for small talk. That's when I decided it was time to turn the tables. I had prepared everything in advance. Hidden in my bag was the folder that would change everything. It wasn't just some casual conversation piece. It was the truth. It was all the documentation, emails, bank records, photos, and legal papers that proved my mom and Mark's lies. The lies they had been living with for years. The lies they had used to manipulate me. And my dad. And take everything from him. I slid the folder across the table toward my mom. At first, no one noticed. Ryan was still on his phone, probably scrolling through Instagram or TikTok, not even bothering to look up. Mark continued to joke about something I didn't care to hear. But then my mom's eyes fell on the folder. I watched as she picked it up, then slowly began flipping through it. Her face changed as she read, but she tried to mask it. The color drained from her face, and for a split second, I thought she might choke on her wine. I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just waited. And then I heard her mutter, "You little bitch!" Her voice was barely above a whisper, but the words were clear. Mark, sensing something was wrong, leaned forward, his face now pale. He didn't ask me what was going on. He didn't need to. He knew exactly what I was holding. "You said you deleted that stuff," he snapped, his voice shaky. I didn't respond. I just calmly took a sip of my water, watching the way their faces twisted with panic. Ryan, who had been blissfully unaware, finally looked up from his phone. He didn't get it. Not at first. But the tension in the room was impossible to ignore. My mom slammed the folder shut. But I didn't stop there. "The originals are already with people who matter," I said, standing up and gathering my things. "This is just for your personal enjoyment." With that, I turned and walked out. I could feel their eyes on my back. And I didn't care. They could stare all they wanted. For the first time in years, I was in control. They had no idea how much more I had left to reveal. The documents they had just seen were only the beginning. I wasn't just exposing their lies. I was dismantling everything they had built. And I wasn't going to stop until they understood exactly what they had done. The moment I walked out of that dinner, I knew everything was about to change. I didn't have a master plan for revenge. I had a master plan for justice. For the first time, I wasn't letting anyone dictate the terms of my life anymore. I had spent too many years being the invisible one, the one who kept everything together while they fell apart.
I wasn't that person anymore.
And once I made the decision to step away, everything started falling into place. The fallout came quickly. It wasn't just a matter of family drama anymore. It was public. Everyone in our small community knew by the end of the week. My mom and Mark had tried to cover it up at first, claiming I was misunderstanding things. But the evidence was too strong. People started talking. My dad's name was finally cleared. He had been the victim of a financial scam orchestrated by my mother and her new husband. And now the truth was out. They tried to salvage what they could, but it wasn't enough. My mom was used to controlling the narrative, but she had no idea how much I had already taken from her. The emails I had found, the bank records, The fake shell companies, all of it, had been sent to a lawyer, and it was in the process of being legally reviewed. There was no way to get around it. She couldn't manipulate her way out of this one. When the letter came official, certified mail, I knew it was over for them. My mom was the one who opened it. Of course, I wasn't there when it arrived. But I heard the scream. The envelope wasn't just full of legal jargon. It was a death sentence to everything they had built on lies. I could hear her from the other room, cursing and yelling. Mark, who had been trying to act calm through it all, was now frantically Googling the legal terms he didn't understand. Ryan, he was still oblivious, just like always. But when he finally understood what was happening, when the weight of the situation hit him, he started texting me. "What's going on? What have you done? Why are you blowing up the family over something that happened years ago?" I didn't respond. He didn't deserve an explanation. He had been part of the problem, and now he had to face the consequences of his inaction. But my mom, my stepdad, and even Ryan, none of them were prepared for what was coming. When the judge's ruling was issued, it was clear. The house was gone. The car was gone. The savings they had siphoned off from my father, all gone. The court ruled that everything had been obtained through fraudulent means and was to be returned with interest. My mom tried to fight it, but the evidence was airtight. She could no longer claim to be the victim. It wasn't just the financial fallout. There was social fallout, too. The community that had once turned a blind eye now saw her for who she truly was. Neighbors who had once sided with her, who had praised her for being a strong woman and a devoted mother, now turned their backs. The truth was out, and the mask had finally come off. I don't think my mom ever truly understood the extent of her manipulation until she saw the consequences hit her in the face. I wasn't there to witness her breakdown, but I heard enough. I heard from neighbors who used to visit that she had been trying to contact me, begging for forgiveness, claiming she didn't mean it. But I had already made my decision. There was no going back. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for me. Ryan, after the money ran out, tried to reach out again. This time, it wasn't a text. It was a phone call. "Leah, what's going on? I don't understand why you did this. We're family." The same old script. But there was no loyalty left. No apology. Nothing but silence when the money ran out. I didn't respond to his call either. What I did instead was make a decision that had taken years for me to come to. I cut them all out. Not just from my life, but from my heart. They were not the people I had been fighting for all these years. They had never been the family I thought they were. The family I had always wanted was never going to come to me. So I had to let go of the idea of what they could be and accept what they really were. It was peaceful, in a way, but also painful. The hardest part wasn't the fallout. It wasn't the court order or the loss of the house. It was the silence that followed. The absence of my family, the years of trying to please them and get them to see me. All of it just faded into the background. And in its place, I found something I hadn't had in years. Peace. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone. I didn't need their approval. I had built something for myself, and that was enough. I had my dad back in my life. And together, we were working to rebuild what had been broken. Slowly, over time, we started healing the wounds that had been left by my mom's lies. But it wasn't just about forgiveness or reconciliation. It was about understanding. I finally understood my worth. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. I was enough. And I didn't need anyone's approval to feel that way. For the first time in a long while, I woke up without the weight of guilt hanging over me. Without the constant fear that I was doing something wrong by choosing myself. After everything that had happened, after all the lies, manipulation, and sacrifices, I was finally living my truth. And, as strange as it seemed, it felt like breathing again.
I had spent so many years chasing the idea of family,
Thinking that if I worked hard enough and sacrificed enough, they would finally see me. Finally recognize that I wasn't just the reliable one who cleaned up their mess. But that wasn't the reality. The truth was, I was always the one doing the emotional labor, the one holding everything together while they tore each other apart. When I stopped, when I took a step back and let go of that burden, I realized something crucial. I didn't need them to see me. I could see myself. In the weeks after the dust settled, I slowly rebuilt my life. The family that I had once fought for was no longer part of the equation. Instead, I began focusing on the relationships that truly mattered, the people who had been there for me, quietly supporting me in the background. They weren't flashy or dramatic. They were just real. People who didn't ask for anything in return except honesty, loyalty, and love. I spent more time with my dad. The man I once thought of as a distant, unreliable figure was proving to be the exact opposite. As we talked more, I started to understand the complexities of his past, the things that had shaped him, the mistakes he had made, and the way he had been manipulated by my mom. It wasn't perfect, but it was healing. Slowly, we began to rebuild the father-daughter relationship I had longed for. And then there was my work. I had always been good at what I did, but now I was excelling. My consultancy grew faster than I expected. Clients came to me for advice, for expertise, and I was able to offer them solutions that not only made sense, but also gave me a sense of pride. The financial independence I had worked so hard for gave me the confidence to keep pushing forward. I was building something real now, something that would last. But even with all this success, there were moments when I felt a pang of loneliness. I had cut ties with my family. Yes, but that didn't mean it was easy. Sometimes, I would drive past places that reminded me of them, our old family home. The park where I had spent hours trying to impress them, hoping they'd see me. Those memories didn't just vanish overnight. They lingered, tucked away in the corners of my mind, reminding me of how far I had come and how much I had lost. But the more time passed, the more I realized what I had lost was nothing compared to what I had gained. Freedom, peace, the ability to decide my future without anyone else's input. I had stopped asking for permission, stopped seeking validation from people who would never give it to me. One afternoon, I received a message from Ryan. For the first time since everything had unfolded, he reached out not with anger, but with an apology. It was brief, almost too simple to believe. "I know I messed up," he wrote. "I was selfish. I get it now. I was wrong. And I don't know how to fix things. But I'm sorry." I sat with that message for hours. Ryan had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who could slide by without ever having to face the consequences of his actions. I wasn't sure if this was an attempt to mend things for his own sake or if it was genuine. But for the first time, I realized that it didn't matter. Whether or not he changed was no longer my problem. "I had already moved on," I replied, keeping it simple. "Thank you for the apology, but I'm not ready for that right now." I wasn't bitter anymore. I wasn't angry. I was just done. Done with waiting for them to come around. Done with hoping they would see me for who I really was. I had already seen myself, and that was enough. And then, one night, after a long day of work, I sat on my porch, looking at the stars. I didn't feel the need to chase anything anymore. I was living my truth. The sun would come up tomorrow, and I would keep going. I didn't know where it would lead, but I wasn't afraid. I was ready for whatever came next. This section explores the emotional and practical journey Leah has gone through. showing her growth into a woman who no longer seeks validation from her toxic family. It delves into her reflections on loneliness, independence, and reconciliation. The writing ensures that the story remains grounded in Leah's inner transformation while maintaining fluid transitions and emotional consistency. It also sets up her readiness for the future, demonstrating how she's come to terms with the past and is now prepared for what lies ahead.